I bet. I'm gonna record myself reading just to have. And let's see. All right, Howard Zinn, 20 minutes on the clock. Let's go. Acknowledgements, skip that. Intro, skip that. A People's History of the United States. Let's go. Let's repeat history class because I ain't fucking pay attention. A rockman and woman, naked, tawny, and full of wonder, emerged from their villages onto the island beaches and swam out to get a closer look at the strange big boat. When Columbus and his sailors came ashore, carrying swords, speaking oddly, the Arawaks ran to greet them and brought them food, water, gifts. He later wrote of this in his log. They brought us parrots and balls of cotton and spears and many other things, which they exchanged for the glass beads and hawk bells. They willingly traded everything they owned. They were well built and good bodies and handsome features. They do not bear arms and do not know them, for I showed them a sword. They took it to by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron. Their spears are made out of cane. They would make 5 fine servants. Wow, Christopher Columbus is fucked up already trying to enslave them within 10 minutes of meeting them. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want. God damn, Christopher Columbus, you evil bitch. These Arawaks, these Arawaks of the Bahamas Island were much like Indians on the mainland, who were remarkable, European observers were to say again and again, for their hospitality, their belief in sharing. These traits did not stand out in the Europe of the Renaissance, dominated as it was by the religion of popes, the government of kings, the frenzy for money that marked Western civilization, and the first messenger to the Americas, Christopher Columbus. Columbus wrote, "As soon as I arrived in the Indies, on the first island which I found, I took some of the natives by force in order that they might learn and might give me information of what there are in these parts." The information that Columbus wanted most was, where is the gold? He had persuaded the king and queen of Spain to finance an expedition to the islands. The wealth he expected would be on the other side of the Atlantic, the Indies and the Asia, gold and spices. For like other informed people of his time, he knew the world was round, and he could sail west in order to get to the far east. Spain was recently unified, one of the new modern nation states like France, England, and Portugal. Its population, mostly poor peasants, worked for the nobility, who were 2% of the population and owned 95% of the land. So basically the Jews of Spain. Spain had tied itself to the Catholic Church, expelled all the Jews. Oh, they were against the Jews. Driven out the Moors. Like other states of the modern world, Spain sought gold, which was becoming the new modern world. Which was becoming the new mark of wealth, more useful than land because it could buy anything. There was gold in Asia, it was thought, and certainly silks and spices, for Marco Polo and others had brought back marvelous things from their overland expedition centuries before. Now that the Turks have conquered Constantinople and the Eastern Mediterranean and controlled the land routes to Asia, a sea route was needed. And thus Christopher Columbus was born. Alright, so my bad. A sea route was needed. Portuguese sailors were working their way around the southern tip of Africa. Spain decided to gamble on a long sail across an unknown ocean. In return for bringing back gold and spices, they promised Columbus 10% of the profits, governorship over newfound lands, and the fame that would go with the new title, Admiral of the Ocean Sea. He was a merchant's clerk from the Italian city of Ginao, part-time weaver, the son of a skilled weaver, an expert sailor. So he said he was a merchant's clerk an expert sailor. He set out with 3 sailing ships, the largest of which was the Santa Maria, perhaps 100 feet long and 39 crew members. Columbus would never have made it to Asia, which was thousands of miles farther than he had calculated, imagining a small world. He would have been doomed by the great expanse of sea, but he was lucky. 1/4 of the way there, he came upon an unknown, uncharted land that lay between Europe and Asia, the Americas. It was early October 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492, and 33 days since he and his crew had left the Canary Islands off the Atlantic coast of Africa. Now they saw these branches and sticks floating in the water. They saw flocks of birds. They were a sign of land. Then, on October 12th, a sailor called Rodrigo saw the early morning moon shining on white sands and cried out. It was an island in the Bahamas, the Caribbean Sea. The first man to sight land was supposed to get a yearly pension of 10,000 maravedis for life. I'm guessing that's the currency of that time, but Rodrigo never got it. Columbus claimed he had seen a light in the evening before. He got the reward. Yo, Columbus is a bastard, bro. He's a selfish prick. So approaching land, they were met with the Arawak Indians, who swam out to greet them. The Arawaks lived in village communes, had a developed agriculture of corn, yams, cassava. They would spin and weave, but they had no horses or work animals. They had no iron, but they wore tiny gold ornaments in their ears. This was to have an enormous consequence. It led Columbus to take some of them aboard ship as prisoners because he insisted that they guide them to the source of the gold. He then sailed to what is now Cuba, then to the Hispaniola, the island which today consists of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. There are bits of visible gold in the rivers, and a gold mask presented to Columbus by a local Indian chief led to wild visions of gold fields. So Columbus was greedy, he was hungry, he was looking for a way to make a name for himself, right? He wanted to reap all the rewards of finding new land, which he thought was Asia, but was actually America. On Hispaniola, out of timbers from the Santa Maria, which had run around, Columbus built a fort, the first European military base in the Western Hemisphere. He called it Navidad, Christmas. So Columbus built a fort, the first European military base in the Western Hemisphere. He called it Christmas and left 39 crew members there, with instructions to find and store the gold. He took more Indian prisoners and put them aboard his 2 remaining ships. At one part of the island, he got into a fight with Indians who refused to trade as many bows and arrows as he and his men wanted. 2 were run through with swords and bled to death. Then the Nina and the Pinta set sail for the Azores and Spain. When the weather turned cold, the Indian prisoners began to die. Bro, that's so fucked up. He just came into their land, killed them, took all their gold, or trying to take all their gold, and enslaved them. Columbus' report to the court in Madrid was extravagant. He insisted he had reached Asia, it was Cuba, and an island off the coast of China, Hispaniola. His descriptions were part fact, part fiction. Hispaniola is a miracle. Mountains and hills, plains and pastures are both fertile and beautiful. The harbors are unbelievably good, and there are many wide rivers of which the majority contain gold. There are many spices and great mines of gold and other metals. The Indians, Columbus reported, are so naive and so free with their possessions that no one who has not witnessed them would believe it. When you ask for something they have, they never say no. To the contrary, they offer to share with anyone. Damn man, Native Americans, they deserve not to pay taxes for the rest of their life. That's actually fucked up. He concluded his report by asking for a little help from the majesties, and in return, he would bring them from his next voyage as much gold as they need and as many slaves as they ask. He was full of religious talk. Thus the eternal God, our Lord, gives victory to those who follow his way over apparent impossibilities. Because of Columbus's exaggerated report and promises, his second expedition was given 17 ships. So he went from 3 to 17. 17 ships, and more than 1,200 men. The aim was clear: slaves and gold. They went from island to island in the Caribbean, taking Indians as captives. But as word spread of the Europeans' intent, they found more and more empty villages. One Haiti, they found, what the fuck? One Haiti? They found that the sailors left behind at Fort Navidad had been killed in a battle with the Indians. The Indians, after they had roamed the island in gangs looking for gold, were taking women and children as slaves for sex and labor. Now, from his base on Haiti, Columbus sent expedition after expedition into the interior. They found no gold fields but had to fill up their ships, returning to Spain with some kind of dividend. In the year of 1495, they went on a great slave raid, rounded up 1,500 Arak men and women and children, put them in pens guarded by Spaniards and dogs, then picked the 500 best specimens to load onto the ships. Of those 500, 200 died en route. The rest arrived alive in Spain and were put up for sale by the archdeacon of the town, who reported that although the slaves were naked as the day they were born, they showed no embarrassment than animals. Columbus later wrote, "Let us in the name of the Holy Trinity go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." So they basically used the Lord and God as an excuse to, enslave these Indians, because they thought this is what the Lord would want, this is what Jesus would want, this is what the European churches, this is what they're set out for. So they kind of used God in a way as a purpose to enslave these Indians. But too many of the slaves died in captivity. And so Columbus, desperate to pay back his dividends to those who had invested, had to make good his promise to fill the ships with gold. In the province of Chacao on Haiti, where he and his men imagined huge gold fields to exist, they ordered all persons 14 years or older to collect a certain quantity of gold every 3 months. When they brought it, they were given a copper token to hang around their necks. So they give them gold and they give you back a copper fucking token. What, Columbus, you scumbag, I hate you. You should have never been any of our nursery rhymes. This is why Howard Zinn is the real author, is the truth. So they fled. The Indians had been given an impossible task. The only gold around was bits of dust gathered from the stream, so they fled, were hunted down like dogs, and were killed. Trying to put together an army of resistance, the Arawaks faced Spaniards who had armor, muskets, sword, horses. When the Spaniards took prisoners, they hung them or burned them to death. Among the Arawaks, mass suicide began, with cassava poison. Infants were killed to save them from the Spaniards. Oh, that's so sad. Infants were killed to save them from the Spaniards. So they rather killed children than have them enslaved and hung by the Spanish. That's so fucked up. In 2 years, through murder, mutilation, or suicide, half of the 25,000 Indians on Haiti were dead. My God, he was the Spanish Genghis Khan. When it became clear that there were no gold left, the Indians were taken as slave labor on huge estates, known later as encomiendas. So they were encomiendas they were worked at a furious pace. They died by the thousand. By the year 1550, almost 20 years later, there were perhaps 50,000 Indians left. So 250,000 to 50,000. By 1550, there were 500. A report of the year 1650 shows none of the original Arawaks of their descendants left on the island, The chief source, and on many matters, the only source of information about what happened to the island after Columbus came in, Bartolomé de las Casas, who, as a young priest, participated in the conquest of Cuba. For a time, he owned a plantation on which Indian slaves worked, but he gave that up and became a vehement critic of Spanish cruelty. Las Casas transcribed Columbus' journal and in his 50s began to multi-volume history of the Indians. In it, he describes the Indians. They're agile, he said, and can swim long distances, especially the women. They were not completely peaceful because they do battle from time to time with other tribes, but their casualties seem small, and they fight when they are individually moved to do so because of some of the grievance, not on the orders of captains or kings. Women in Indian society were treated so well as to startle the Spaniards. Las Casas describes sex relations. Marriage laws are non-existent. Shit, sign me up. Marriage laws are non-existent. Men and women alike choose their mates and leave them as they please, without offense, jealousy, or anger. They multiply in great abundance. Pregnant women work to the last minute and give birth almost painlessly. Up to the next day, they bathe in the river and are clean and healthy as before giving birth. If they tire of their men, that's what it says. They gave themselves abortions with herbs and forced stillbirths, covering their shameful parts with leaves or cotton cloth. Although on the whole, Indian men and women took upon total nakedness with as much casualness as we took upon man's head or as his hands. So I guess the old plan B was to stuff cotton down their cooch, cotton and leaves. The Indians, Las Casas, says have no religion, at least no temple. They live in large communal bell-shaped buildings housing up to 600 people at a time. Made of very strong wood and roofed palm leaves, they prize bird feathers or various colors, beads made out of fish bones and green and white stones, which they would adorn their ears and lips. But they put no value on gold and other precious things. They lack all manner of commerce, neither buying nor selling. They rely exclusively on their natural environment for maintenance. They are extremely generous with their possessions, and by the same token covet the possessions of their friends and expect the same degree of liberality. In Book 2 of the History of the Indies, Las Casas, who at first urged replacing Indians by black slaves, thinking they were stronger and would survive, but later relented when he saw the effects on blacks. Yeah, like it didn't have effects on the Indians. Tells about the treatment of the Indians by the Spaniards. It is a unique account and deserves to be quoted at length. Endless testimonies prove the wild and pacific temperament. How did they know these words back then? Like, actually, like, who the fuck taught them these words? There was no like teachers back then. Prove the mild and pacific temperament of the natives. But our work was so But our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. The admiral, it is true, was blind as those who came after him, and he was so anxious to please the king that he committed irreparable crimes against the Indians. Oh my God, I'm fucking illiterate. All right, last page. So we complete the first episode of the 20-minute reading with Brandon. Las Casas tells how the Spaniards grew more conceited every day, and after a while refused to walk any distance. They rode on the backs of Indians if they were in a hurry, or were carried on hammocks by Indians running in relays. That's fucked. In these cases, they also had Indians carry large leaves to shade them from the sun, and others to fan them with goose wings. Total control led to total cruelty. The Spaniards thought nothing of knifing Indians by 10s and 20s, and of cutting slices of them to test the sharpness of their blades. Disgusting. Las Casas tells how two of these so-called Christians met two Indian boys one day, each carrying a parrot. They took the parrots and for fun beheaded the boys. What the fuck? The Indians' attempts to defend themselves failed, and when they ran off into the hills, they were found and killed. So Las Casas reports they suffered and died in the mines and other labors in desperate silence. knowing not a soul in the world to whom they would turn for help. He describes their work in the mines. Mountains are stripped from top to bottom, mountains are stripped from top to bottom and bottom to top 1,000 times. They dig, split rocks, move stones, and carry dirt on their backs to wash it in the rivers. While those who wash gold stay in the water all the time with their backs bent so consistently it breaks them, and then water invades the mines. The most arduous task of all is to dry the mines by scooping up pans full of water, throwing it outside. All right, boom.